Why the demons begged Jesus to enter the pigs. The legion, the abyss, and the shocking cost of deliverance. Before the man ever came running from the tombs, there had already been a storm. That detail is easy to miss. The story does not begin with screaming among graves. It does not begin with demons begging. It does not begin with a herd of pigs rushing down a steep hillside into the sea. It begins on the water, in the dark, with waves rising around a small boat and terrified disciples wondering whether they would survive the night. Jesus and his disciples had crossed the Sea of Galilee. They were leaving the familiar shore and moving toward the other side, toward a region where the culture was different, where the population was largely Gentile, where pigs were being raised, and where Jewish ideas of purity and uncleanness would collide with the visible misery of a man no one could control. The lake became violent. The wind screamed. The boat shook. Experienced fishermen, men who knew water and weather, panicked. Jesus slept. When they woke him, he rebuked the wind and the waves, and the sea became calm. That moment already revealed something important. The storm obeyed him. But when the boat reached the other side, another kind of storm was waiting on the land. It was not a storm of water. It was a storm inside a human soul. The man came from the tombs. He was not simply troubled. He was not merely lonely or misunderstood. The Gospel of Mark describes him as a man possessed by an unclean spirit, living among graves, crying out night and day, cutting himself, unable to be restrained. People had tried to chain him. They had tried to bind him. But he had broken the chains and shattered the shackles. The village had failed. The family had failed. Human strength had failed. Social control had failed. So the man lived among the dead, even though he was still breathing. This is one of the most haunting pictures in the Gospels. A living man dwelling in a place of death. A human being made in the image of God, reduced to terror, isolation, violence, and shame. His home was no longer a house. His community was no longer family. His voice was no longer truly his own. His body had become a battlefield. And then Jesus stepped onto the shore. The demons saw him before the crowd understood him. They recognized what many people still could not see. They knew his authority. They knew he was not another teacher, not another healer with limited power, not another religious voice to be tested. They knew he was the Son of the Most High God. The man ran and fell before him. The scene is strange because it carries two movements at once. The human being is drawn toward deliverance, but the evil spirits inside him tremble before judgment. The man comes to Jesus, yet the demons resist him. The body kneels, but the voices cry out in fear. That is how divided the man's condition had become. Jesus commanded the unclean spirit to come out of him. Then came the question that made the story unforgettable. "What is your name?" The answer was terrifying. The spirit said that its name was Legion because there were many. A legion was a military word. In the Roman world, it described a large organized unit of soldiers. The word carried the sound of empire, order, occupation, violence, and overwhelming force. This was not one small spiritual disturbance. This was an army of darkness occupying one man. The man had become a territory. His body was treated like conquered land. His voice was used by forces that did not love him. His suffering had become the dwelling place of a multitude. And yet, all that darkness trembled before one Jesus. This is one of the great revelations of the story. The battle was not equal. To the villagers, the man was unstoppable. Chains could not hold him. Fear surrounded him. No one could pass near him safely. He seemed beyond hope. But before Jesus, the legion did not boast. It begged. This is important. Evil often appears powerful from a distance. It looks overwhelming when we are alone. It looks unbeatable when it has occupied a life for many years. It speaks loudly. It threatens. It intimidates. It isolates. It makes people believe that change is impossible. But when evil stands before Christ, it is exposed as terrified, temporary, and dependent on permission. The demons did not command Jesus. They pleaded with him. They begged him not to send them away into the abyss. That word opens another layer of the story. In biblical imagination, the abyss is not simply a deep hole. It is a place of confinement, judgment, and dread. It is associated with the imprisonment of rebellious spiritual powers. The demons were not afraid of losing the man merely because they enjoyed tormenting him. They were afraid of being sent into judgment before the appointed time. This explains why they asked to enter the pigs. At first, the request sounds strange. Why would spirits beg to enter animals? Why pigs? Why not flee? Why not hide somewhere else? Why not remain in the region? The answer begins with the fact that demons in the story desire embodiment, location, and influence. They do not want to be disembodied and cast away into confinement. They seek a place to operate. They seek a host. They seek a foothold in the world. If Jesus drives them out of the man, they want somewhere else to go. Nearby, a large herd of pigs was feeding on the hillside, about 2,000 animals. For Jewish readers, pigs carried the meaning of uncleanness. Under the law of Moses, pigs were unclean animals. The presence of such a large herd in this region already signaled that Jesus was in Gentile territory, or at least in a culturally mixed area, where Jewish purity laws were not shaping everyday life in the same way. The demons begged to enter the pigs because the pigs represented a place of uncleanness, a visible image of impurity in the story's moral and symbolic world. The unclean spirits seek what is unclean. They move toward what reflects their own nature. But there is another reason. By entering the pigs, the demons could reveal their true intent. As long as they possessed the man, they had hidden their destructive purpose behind a human face. People may have feared the man, blamed the man, avoided the man, and treated him as the problem. But the pigs exposed what the demons actually wanted: destruction. As soon as the demons entered the herd, the pigs rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned. 2,000 animals, gone in a violent rush. This is one of the most shocking images in the Gospels. The hillside erupts. The herd panics. The animals run as one mass of terror, driven by forces they cannot understand. They plunge into the water and vanish beneath the waves. The moment is frightening, but it is also revealing. Evil does not build. It consumes. Evil does not cherish the body it occupies. It uses it. Evil does not seek the flourishing of its host. It seeks domination, distortion, and death. That is what the pigs show us. The demons had done to the man slowly what they did to the pigs quickly. They had been driving him toward death for years. They drove him into tombs, into self-harm, into isolation, into a life that looked like death before death. When they entered the pigs, their destructive nature became immediate and visible. The herd's destruction was not random. It was a demonstration. The villagers saw the economic loss, but the reader is meant to see the spiritual truth. If Jesus had not intervened, the man himself was the one being driven toward destruction. Every demon wanted the same destination. Only Christ stood in the way. This is why the story is not merely about pigs. It is about the value of one human soul. To the demons, the man was a dwelling. To the villagers, he may have become a danger, a burden, a shame, or a problem to avoid. To Jesus, he was worth crossing the storm for. That is a beautiful and sobering truth. Jesus crossed a dangerous sea to reach one man whom everyone else had abandoned. He entered a region where he would not be welcomed. He confronted a legion of demons. He permitted an event that would cost the local economy dearly. And he did all of this so that one shattered human being could be restored. The kingdom of God counts differently than the world. The world asks, How much did the pigs cost? Jesus asks, what is a man worth? The world asks, how much money was lost? Jesus asks, who has been set free? The world asks, how can we protect our comfort? Jesus asks, will you receive the mercy of God when it disrupts your life? After the pigs drowned, the herdsman ran and told the town and countryside what had happened. People came to see for themselves, and when they arrived, they found the formerly possessed man sitting there, clothed and in his right mind. That phrase is one of the most powerful in the entire story. Sitting, clothed, in his right mind. The man who had been restless was now sitting. The man who had been exposed and shamed was now clothed. The man whose mind had been occupied by torment was now restored to peace. This is deliverance. It is not only the removal of evil. It is the restoration of personhood. Jesus did not simply stop the screaming. He gave the man back to himself. He returned his mind, his dignity, his future, and his place in the world. The man who lived among graves was ready to live among people again. But the reaction of the crowd was not joy. They were afraid. They had seen the impossible. A man no chains could hold had been restored by one command. The village's terror had ended. A soul had been rescued. A living testimony sat before them. And yet the people begged Jesus to leave their region. This may be the saddest part of the story. The demons begged to enter the pigs. The people begged Jesus to leave. The demons feared his judgment. The people feared his power. They did not celebrate the man's freedom. They did not gather around Jesus in worship. They did not say, if you can save him, save us too. Instead, they looked at the cost. 2,000 pigs were gone. Their economy had been shaken. Their familiar life had been interrupted. The presence of Jesus had become too expensive. So they asked him to go away. This reveals something deeply uncomfortable. People can prefer profitable bondage to costly deliverance. The village had learned to live with the possessed man as long as he stayed among the tombs. They had adapted to his suffering. They had built their routines around his misery. They could tolerate evil when it was contained at the edge of town. But when Jesus brought deliverance and the cost touched their possessions, they rejected him. This is not only an ancient problem, it is modern too. Many people want healing, but not if it changes their habits. They want freedom, but not if it costs their comfort. They want truth, but not if it exposes their idols. They want peace, but not if it disrupts their profits. They want God's presence, but only if he does not interfere with the systems they depend on. The people chose the pigs over the deliverer. They chose financial loss as the main meaning of the event. They saw a restored man, but their hearts calculated the cost. This is a warning. Sometimes Jesus comes into a life and begins by disturbing what we thought was normal. He exposes what we tolerated. He removes what we were using. He challenges what we valued. He shows us that our peace was not peace, only compromise. And in that moment, every heart must choose. Will I welcome the Savior even if he disturbs my economy? Will I choose a healed soul over a herd of pigs? Will I value deliverance over comfort? Will I let Christ overturn what has profited from bondage? The story asks this question sharply. The man who was delivered wanted to go with Jesus. That response makes sense. He had been rescued from unimaginable torment. Jesus was the first person who had not abandoned him to the tombs. To stay close to him must have felt like safety, gratitude, and love. But Jesus did not allow him to come in the boat. Instead, he gave him a mission. He told him to go home to his people and tell them what the Lord had done for him and how mercy had been shown to him. This is remarkable. The man who had been known as a terror became a witness. The man who had lived in isolation became a messenger. The man whose voice had been used by demons would now use his voice to proclaim mercy. The man who had been driven away from society was sent back into society with good news. This is the power of testimony. Jesus did not send a trained scholar into the Decapolis first. He sent a healed man. He sent someone whose life had become evidence. His story was not perfect theology in an academic sense. It was living proof. I was in the tombs and now I am home. I was naked and now I am clothed. I was tormented and now I am at peace. I was bound and now I am free. Jesus had mercy on me. No argument is quite like a transformed life. The man went away and began to proclaim what Jesus had done for him, and people marveled. The region that had begged Jesus to leave could not silence the testimony he left behind. This is another beautiful truth. When people reject Jesus, he may still leave mercy in their midst. The healed man became a living reminder that the kingdom had visited their shore. Every time someone saw him, they saw the question again, what kind of power can do this? What kind of mercy crosses a storm for one suffering man? What kind of Lord can make a legion beg? The story therefore moves from confrontation to mission. The man's past did not disqualify him. It became the place where grace was most visible. This matters deeply for anyone who feels ashamed of what they have survived. Some people believe their past is too dark to be useful. They believe their wounds are too ugly. They believe their history makes them unworthy. They believe that if others knew where they had been, they would never listen. But Jesus often turns graves into pulpits. He takes the places of greatest shame and transforms them into testimony. He does not deny the past. He redeems it. He does not pretend the tombs never existed. He sends the former captive to tell what mercy did there. This does not mean trauma is easy. It does not mean pain disappears instantly. It does not mean every detail must be shared publicly. But it does mean that no darkness is too deep for Christ to enter, and no restored life is useless in his hands. The man from the tombs becomes a sign of hope for everyone who feels beyond repair. There is another layer in the story. Jesus had authority over the storm, the demons, the animals, the man, and the mission. The storm obeyed him. The legion begged him. The pigs could not be used without his permission. The man was restored by his command. The witness was sent by his instruction. Everything in the story reveals authority. Yet this authority is not cold domination. It is compassionate power. Jesus does not use authority to display himself. He uses it to rescue. He does not cross the sea for applause. He crosses for one tormented man. His authority is terrifying to demons and healing to the broken. This is the difference between the power of darkness and the power of Christ. Darkness controls by occupation. Christ restores by deliverance. Darkness uses a person and destroys him. Christ frees a person and sends him. Darkness isolates. Christ reconnects. Darkness steals the voice. Christ gives testimony. Darkness drives toward death. Christ sends toward life. That contrast is the heart of the story. Why did the demons ask to enter the pigs? Because they feared judgment. Because they wanted a host. Because they were drawn toward uncleanness. Because they wanted to remain active in the world. Because their nature is destructive. Because their request became the way their true purpose was exposed. But the deeper question is not merely why they asked. The deeper question is why Jesus allowed it. He allowed it so the man's deliverance could be visible. He allowed it so the destructive nature of evil would be exposed. He allowed it so the villagers would face a choice. He allowed it so the value of one soul would be placed above material loss. He allowed it so the region would see that no legion could withstand him. The drowned pigs became a sign, a shocking sign, a costly sign, a sign no one could ignore. It forced the villagers to see that something more than human madness had been at work. It forced them to recognize that the man's former condition was not merely a social problem. It was spiritual captivity. It forced them to confront the fact that Jesus had power over the unseen world. And then it revealed their hearts. Would they rejoice over mercy? Or would they reject the one who disrupted their economy? They chose fear. But the healed man chose witness. This contrast continues to speak to every generation. Some people respond to Jesus by saying, "Leave my region." Others respond by saying, "Let me follow you." Some see only what they might lose. Others see the mercy that saved them. Some want Christ at a safe distance. Others cannot imagine life apart from him. The question is not only what happened in the country of the Gerasenes. The question is what we do when Jesus steps onto our shore. Because every life has shores where storms have left us tired. Every community has tombs where suffering has been hidden. Every heart has regions where darkness has found a foothold. Every society has herds of pigs it would rather protect than surrender. Every person must decide whether Jesus is welcome when his mercy becomes disruptive. The man in the tombs teaches us that no one is beyond hope. The demons teach us that evil recognizes Christ's authority. The pigs teach us that darkness always destroys what it occupies. The villagers teach us that fear and greed can reject even the clearest miracle. The healed man teaches us that testimony can begin exactly where shame once lived. This story is frightening, but it is also full of hope. It tells us that Jesus is not afraid of the places we avoid. He is not afraid of tombs. He is not afraid of screaming. He is not afraid of uncleanness. He is not afraid of spiritual warfare. He is not afraid of what has occupied a person for years. He is not afraid of what others call hopeless. He steps onto the shore. That is the grace of the story. The man did not sail across the lake to find Jesus. Jesus came to him. The man's condition was so severe that he could not organize his own rescue. He could not clean himself up first. He could not become respectable and then approach the Lord. He came as he was, tormented, exposed, broken, and divided. And Jesus did not turn away. He spoke deliverance. That means hope does not begin when we finally become strong enough to save ourselves. Hope begins when Christ arrives with authority we do not possess. This is the gospel hidden inside the exorcism. Human beings are not saved because they are strong enough to break every chain. They are saved because Jesus is stronger than what binds them. The man had broken physical chains but could not free his soul. That detail is important. He could shatter iron, but he could not overcome the legion within. External strength did not equal inner freedom. Many people know this experience. They may appear strong. They may survive hardship. They may resist other people's attempts to control them. They may break visible limitations. Yet inside, they remain bound by fear, addiction, shame, rage, trauma, lust, pride, despair, or spiritual darkness. The story says that real freedom requires more than human force. It requires Christ. The man's transformation is total. He does not merely become quieter. He becomes whole. He is seated, clothed, and in his right mind. These are signs of restored humanity. The image of God, once buried under torment, begins to shine again. This is what Jesus does. He does not merely manage symptoms. He restores identity. The villagers had tried to manage the man. Jesus restored him. This is a lesson for churches, families, and communities. We can become experts at managing problems from a distance. We can build systems of avoidance. We can push broken people to the margins. We can talk about them as if their suffering defines them. We can become comfortable as long as their pain stays outside our doors. But Jesus does not manage from a distance. He moves toward the suffering one. The church that follows him must learn to do the same. Not recklessly, not without wisdom, not by pretending evil is not real, but with the conviction that no human being should be reduced to the worst thing that has happened to them or the darkest thing that has controlled them. The man in the tombs had a name before the demons spoke. The demons said, "Legion," but Jesus saw the man. That is another powerful truth. Darkness tries to rename people. It calls them addict, failure, danger, outcast, madman, unclean, worthless, hopeless, too far gone. Jesus does not accept the name darkness gives. He speaks to the captivity, but he sees the person beneath it. He confronts the evil without confusing the man with the evil. That distinction is part of his mercy. The villagers may have looked and seen only a terror. Jesus looked and saw a son who needed freedom. This is how grace works. Grace sees what sin has buried. Grace calls forth what shame has covered. Grace separates the person from the chains. Grace gives back a future. When the man asks to go with Jesus, he is not rejected. He is redirected. Jesus gives him a mission that fits his testimony. The man is sent to his own people because his own people knew what he had been. They had heard the screams. They had seen the chains. They had avoided the tombs. Now they would see the change. His restored life would speak louder than a stranger's sermon. This is still true. People may argue with doctrine, but they struggle to dismiss a transformed life. They may question theology, but they notice when rage becomes peace, when addiction becomes freedom, when bitterness becomes forgiveness, when shame becomes courage, when a person once lost begins to love. Testimony is not a performance. It is gratitude given a voice. The man's story became a bridge for the gospel into Gentile territory. The one who had been isolated became a witness to many. His pain was not wasted. His deliverance became a seed. This is the hope for every redeemed past. God does not delight in our suffering, but he can redeem what suffering tried to destroy. He can turn scars into signs. He can turn graves into beginnings. He can turn the voice once used by darkness into a voice that proclaims mercy. The story of Legion also teaches us about the cost of spiritual freedom. There are times when deliverance exposes hidden economies. The pigs were not just animals. They were wealth. They represented livelihood, trade, investment, and security. When they were lost, the village felt the cost immediately. This is why the people reacted with fear. They may have thought, if Jesus stays, what else will change? What else will he expose? What other losses will his holiness require? That question is not unreasonable. Jesus does change things. When he enters a life, some profits may end. Some relationships may be challenged. Some habits may die. Some identities may be surrendered. Some comfortable compromises may be exposed. The real question is whether the freedom he brings is worth more than what we lose. The gospel says yes. The villagers said no. Every listener must decide. The pigs can represent anything we value more than a soul. Money, reputation, comfort, addiction, control, familiar sin, social approval, profitable injustice, or the quiet arrangement that lets suffering stay out of sight. When Jesus delivers someone, he may also reveal what our hearts have been protecting. This is why the story remains shocking. It does not allow us to watch from a safe distance. It turns toward us and asks, if Jesus saved someone but it cost you something, would you rejoice or ask him to leave? That question cuts deeply. The answer reveals what we worship. In the end, the demons lost their host, the pigs lost their lives, the villagers lost wealth, but the man gained himself. And heaven counted that as victory. The economy of the kingdom is centered on life. One soul restored is worth more than a herd. One person delivered is worth more than public comfort. One testimony born from mercy can be worth more than an entire region's approval. Jesus left when the people asked him to leave. That is also sobering. He did not force them to welcome him. He did not argue endlessly. He allowed them the dignity and danger of their rejection. But he left behind a witness. This shows both judgment and mercy. The people rejected his presence, but they were not left without testimony. The healed man became the message they could not escape. Sometimes God's mercy remains in places that have rejected him through the life of someone he has changed. A person in a family, a believer in a workplace, a testimony in a hostile city, a quiet life of mercy in a place that does not want sermons. The man did not need to follow Jesus physically in the boat to be close to his mission. Obedience made him part of it. This is important for those who feel that real discipleship must look like leaving everything in a dramatic way. Sometimes Jesus says, "Go home, tell your people, live the miracle where everyone remembers your chains." That may be harder than getting in the boat. To return home as a changed person requires courage. People may not believe you at first. They may remember your past. They may test your transformation. They may whisper about the tombs. But over time, a life made steady by mercy becomes its own proclamation. The healed man's first congregation was the community that feared him. His first sermon was his restored presence. His first message was simple: "The Lord had mercy on me." That is enough. As we listen to this story, we should avoid turning it only into a spectacle about demons and pigs. The supernatural elements are real within the narrative, but the center of the story is Jesus. The focus is not the mystery of demons. The focus is the authority and mercy of Christ. If we become more fascinated with Legion than with the Lord, we have missed the point. The demons are many. Jesus is one. But one Jesus is enough. That is the message. The story begins with a storm and ends with a witness. It begins with disciples afraid on the sea and a tormented man among tombs. It ends with a calm lake behind Jesus, a restored man in his right mind, and a region filled with the first echoes of his testimony. The storm on the water showed that creation obeys him. The demons on the shore showed that darkness fears him. The restored man showed that mercy defines him. And the villagers showed that human hearts can stand before a miracle and still choose fear. This is perhaps the most sobering warning. Deliverance can happen in front of people and they can still miss grace because they are counting losses. Jesus can restore what no one else could fix, and people can still ask him to leave if his holiness threatens their arrangements. So the final message is not only, Jesus can deliver the most tormented soul. It is also, do not love your pigs more than his presence. Do not love comfort more than truth. Do not love profit more than mercy. Do not love familiar darkness more than disruptive light. Do not love a manageable problem more than a transforming Savior. Because Jesus still comes to shores where people least expect him. He still crosses storms for the one everyone else has abandoned. He still speaks with authority over what no chain can fix. He still exposes the destructive nature of evil. He still restores dignity. He still sends healed people home with a story to tell. The question is whether we will welcome him. If you feel like the man in the tombs, the story says there is hope. You are not beyond reach. You are not your chains. You are not the name darkness gave you. You are not the place where people left you. Christ can meet you even there. If you feel like the disciples, afraid after one storm only to face another, the story says Jesus is Lord over both sea and spirit. The storm that frightens you is not stronger than him. If you feel like the villagers, disturbed by what obedience may cost, the story warns you not to reject the presence of God because he threatens your comfort. If you feel like the healed man, grateful but unsure what comes next, the story gives you a mission. Go and tell what mercy has done. That is the lasting power of Mark 5. It is not only an exorcism. It is a revelation of value. It tells us what demons want, what people fear, what Jesus commands, and what a restored life can become. The demons begged for pigs. The people begged Jesus to leave. The healed man begged to follow. And Jesus turned him into a witness. In that sequence, every human heart can find itself. What are we begging for? A place to hide from judgment? A Savior who will leave our comfort untouched? A chance to stay close to the one who saved us? May we choose the prayer of the healed man. May we desire the presence of Jesus more than the security of the herd. May we value one restored soul more than visible wealth. May we understand that darkness always destroys, but Christ always restores. May we become people whose lives say clearly, "The Lord has had mercy on me." And may we never forget the image at the center of the story. A man once lost among tombs, now sitting in peace. A mind once torn by voices, now quiet and whole. A body once exposed and wounded, now clothed. A life once occupied by a legion, now filled with testimony. That is what the mercy of Jesus can do. And that is why the demons trembled when he stepped onto the shore.